Today we will talk about ASPICE for cybersecurity. So, as you guys might be knowing, that there are some more processes which have been added to the ASPICE landscape, and they are more relevant for cybersecurity. So let's go through them, see what are those new processes, and let's do some interesting discussion on them. Falgun, if you could share.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So here we have the automotive spice process reference model, and we can see the newly added processes. Yeah, we can see with this green bracket. So we have one process newly added to the acquisition process group, which is supplier request and selection. And we have four new engineering processes added, which are cybersecurity requirement elicitation, cybersecurity implementation, risk treatment verification, and risk treatment validation. And then we have one process in the management process group, which is MAN 7, cybersecurity risk management.
So maybe just for to understand as a question. So if we start with acquisition process group, so there was already ACQ4, which was more of supplier monitoring, and ACQ15, which was supplier qualification.
Mhm.
Now, what kind of addition are we seeing with ACQ2, the supplier's request and selection?
Okay. I mean, in the next episodes, we will go a bit in detail about these processes. However, based on what I have read, this particular ACQ2 is more, referring to selection of a supplier for the cybersecurity related activities. So this is where it would give some best practices in order to evaluate their know-how, whether they have a right kind of quality process landscape, processes in place. Did they undergo any kind of quality related assessments in the past? Can they show that kind of evidence and so on and so forth? So it is kind of okay. I mean, I shouldn't say it is similar because I think supplier monitoring was not really about selection of the supplier, rather it was more about the monitoring. But this is more about how do we send out the cybersecurity related RFQs? How do I select one supplier among many options which are available, as well as what are the prerequisites normally as a customer I should look for, and what evidences I should ask for in order to support my decision making. So that's more is been sorry, that is what is considered as a part of the ACQ2. But again,
Okay.
as I said, in detail, we will go through deep dive into the process in the next episodes.
Okay. So it is more on the lines of being similar to ACQ15 where you do supplier qualification. However, would you also agree to the statement if I make that if, let's say, I'm a company who already have a defined process for ACQ15, I would still have to have a separate process for ACQ2, which means I need to invest a bit more to look into the cybersecurity specific details that I have to add for ACQ2.
Okay, there it's bit it's an interesting question. The problem here is ACQ15 is not in the VDA scope. So
Mm.
which means I'm expecting that many of the automotive companies do not have a defined process for ACQ15. Maybe within the organization level, they may have certain processes, of course, because component manufacturers or tier ones, they normally have their own process of qualifying the supplier, but it may not be called as ACQ15. Yeah. So this is where there is a bit of a, let's say, focus on ACQ2 related to cybersecurity, supplier selection process. Yeah. So before we jump into this individual process, maybe I have a question for you all. Now we have a automotive spice process landscape, right? So as a part of that, I mean, I'm talking outside these cybersecurity related processes. We had eSpace 3.1. In that, we had a VDA scope. So there we had a management related processes. There we had a supporting processes. There we had engineering processes. Now these processes, which you can see in this image, like 6 of them, they are coming on top. Now, does any of you know how these 6 processes will be audited? Can these 6 processes be audited, you know, let's say separately, or do you think it has to be audited on top of those 3.1 ASPICE 3.1 processes, which were already existing?
Okay, maybe if I have to jump in.
Mhm.
So in my perspective, the way I see it, these cybersecurity processes or the 6 new processes that have been added,
Mhm.
it is on top of the existing things, which means when you're doing a software engineering, let's take an example of software engineering project that you have, right?
Mm.
So if it is cybersecurity relevant, you're not just going to do cybersecurity activities. You are supposed to do all your software activities, on
Mm.
top of which you will also have to do the cybersecurity activities, which
Mm.
means you cannot, or if I have to rephrase it, your basic building block is the standard ASPICE, on top of
Mm.
which your security things will start coming up. This is my
Mm.
take on how things would roll out in future.
Mm. I think this is also the right understanding because there are some information given in this particular process document. I mean, for the viewer, everybody can access this document, which is freely available. Normally, you have to search in Google ASPICE for cybersecurity, then you land into this particular document. So we have just taken a snapshot of the process landscape. So even the assessment guideline is also kind of the same, which means you cannot independently assess these 6 processes. Either you should already have the VDA scope assessment available for the other processes in scope, such as engineering processes, supporting processes, management processes. Then on top, you can assess these 6 processes, or you have to do the assessment together. You also have to plan that, perform that, and on top, you have to do this. So it cannot be assessed independently, to say. So that is also the a recommendation from the VDA.
Seems like that makes you have a question.
Yeah, I have question, very generic question. So since from 2021 we have ISO 21434 as a
Mhm.
separate standard, and I believe that certain OEMs also would request a separate audit
Mhm.
for the standard. So why would it be necessary to not only audit on ISO 21434 and include in ASPICE? So if they have ASPICE
Can,
3.1 and
mhm.
separately we have standard, then they can audit only for the standard for cybersecurity.
Mhm. Okay, so if I understand your question right, as a part of ISO
Mm,
21434, we have two kind of activities which are very important. One is cybersecurity audit, and the second one is cybersecurity assessment,
yeah.
right?
Mm,
Now, as a part of the cybersecurity audit, more or less we are, or more or less, an organization will be assessed for, you know, the process related stuff. Like if they have a process in place, which will, let's say, which will enable the organization to
mm,
develop a software or system which is cybersecurity critical. Okay. Now, your question is, since we also have this, apart from that, whenever a cybersecurity audit happens, normally whether these processes
mm.
are audited or what is actually audited. Is that what your question?
Yeah, on the same line. Yes.
If I
Okay.
understand correctly, you also mentioned why is there two separate audits,
Uh,
21434 audit
yeah,
and why there is specific to ASPICE. Is that what you meant?
yeah. Means I am not sure whether separate or if we go for ISO 21434, we can show this as a evidence or not if
Hmm.
we have this. So
Mhm.
that's.
Okay. Okay. Um, Let me take you back a bit into how it was done with the functional safety audits in the past. Yeah, because I think cybersecurity audits, as far as I know, some of the companies are already doing, especially these processes are also being assessed right now. Because when I speak to some principal assessors, they're already doing it in some organizations, so it's happening. Now the question is, whether if I assess this as a part of the ASPICE, is it sufficient for me to, show the evidence during the cybersecurity audit? It's kind of a yes and a no. Yes, in the sense, it is not to say that whatever I do here will go waste. Rather, I can reuse. Because at the end of the day, what is normally, checked during the cybersecurity audit? Again, they are only checking your cybersecurity related processes. In the sense, are you able to, derive the cybersecurity related requirements in a right way? Or, are you able to come up with the cybersecurity concept or cybersecurity related architecture in an expected way? Are you, doing the secure coding? Are you doing all the testing which are related to verify the cybersecurity related specifications and so on and so forth? So these processes, if you can see the engineering processes here, they are also, defining or going in the same direction, which means if an organization has already defined a process which is compliant to this landscape, cybersecurity process landscape according to the ASPICE, it will also help them in facing the cybersecurity audits. In that case, see, there are two things. One is, as an organization, I have to do certain activity related to cybersecurity and present the evidence. So there it's for me one-time activity because I do the same activity here also to show the evidence. I also do similar kind of activity also for the cybersecurity audit. Now, when it comes to the audit itself, we need two audits because it is coming from two different standards. Because these particular processes are defined as a part of the ASPICE. So normally, when an OEM asks for the ASPICE assessment, in most of the cases, as long as the product is related to cybersecurity, then these processes are already part of that. But on the other hand, as a part of the compliance to ISO 21434, you also need a cybersecurity audit, which is defined according to the standard 21434 standard. So there also you have to once again go through that audit. But if you have the processes clearly defined and lived according to this particular process landscape, in my opinion, more or less that is also sufficient for you to, pass through cybersecurity audit. There could be here and there deltas. I think that is something we have to check, but more or less this satisfies also the requirements of the cybersecurity audit. Disclaimer, without going too much deep into what is the prerequisites of the cybersecurity audit. So my statements are mainly coming based on the experience what we had in the past when it comes to functional safety audit and the ASPICE. So that's where we have seen this kind of a relationship. Anyone wants to add something?
Yeah, I believe so. Go on, go on.
Now, since you mentioned a bit about functional safety, why is it there no functional safety relevant processes in ASPICE model? Or are we expecting something to be coming in the near future?
Okay. Once again, a very good question, because even when I saw these additional processes for cybersecurity, even I was thinking, because I was thinking for a longer time why there are no additional processes with respect to functional safety in ASPICE. Will there be any additional processes? I don't know. Most likely no, because I have not heard from anybody that there will be some additional processes in ASPICE which are focusing on functional safety, because it's been already more than a decade since we have functional safety standard. So this is where I don't think there will be something new. But yeah, the question is really valid. And I also think, I always thought that we definitely needed additional processes for functional safety, because in the last 10 years, experience with different customers have been different, right? Because when it comes to the functional safety, let's say, life cycle, there is no uniform way of doing it. Every customer has their own way of, deriving the safety requirements or deriving them to the system level, software level, hardware level. More or less, the concept remains the same, but the way it's been implemented is very different with different customers. Sometimes, there is also a bit of a confusion with respect to certain terminology in functional safety. So, yeah, but that is the situation that we don't have one, but we have one for cybersecurity. And what led to a scenario that the governing bodies, which are let's say drafting this particular standard, has decided to add additional cybersecurity processes, but not additional processes for functional safety. We don't know that.
Yeah,
Falcon, what is your take? I mean,
the
because.
only
Mhm.
the only hypothesis probably I can deduce out of the observation, being in the industry, seeing as a user since more than a decade, is that
Mhm.
probably they made a mistake with respect to functional safety, not adding it, and we
Mhm.
see how the tier ones or tier twos or the developers struggle to understand what exactly is functional safety when it comes to the implementation level or
Mhm.
in terms of your software engineering or system engineering. So this
Mhm.
would be probably as a precautionary method. They said, okay, let's start something. Let's not repeat the same thing. So let's start something with cybersecurity. Also, cybersecurity, when you talk about it, there are so many cybersecurity incidents which has caused a lot of lawsuits or a lot of damages, which is more scarier.
Mhm.
And again, my personal feelings, not quoting anyone here, is my personal feeling is that this is a reaction based on what things have happened.
And also it because I again this is also my assumption that it is more making sure that preparing ASPICE towards autonomous driving. So because that is going to be the biggest thing in the future. So this is where because we have heard about ASPICE 4.0, where machine learning is coming in as a new process and so on and so forth. So this is where it could also be one approach to take in that direction. But again, ASPICE 4.0 will be once again discussed in detail in one of the next episodes. Okay. Now let's maybe jump a bit into the cybersecurity engineering process group, because we talked about very briefly about cybersecurity request and selection, which is ACQ2. Let's jump into the cybersecurity engineering process group. Falgun, what is your initial feeling looking at just 4 processes in the engineering? However, if you see in the above level, you see in the normal ASPICE in the VDA scope, we have 4 processes in the system engineering group and 6 processes in the software engineering group, but there are only 4 in the cybersecurity process group. What is your initial thoughts?
It's an interesting observation, I would say. So the way I see it is, first of all, the cybersecurity processes itself is very in the infant stage. I mean, of course, it is 2 years mature enough now, but the processes defined are not exactly as mature as functional safety.
Mhm.
Uh, yes, I do have a lot of comparison to functional safety, but that's again another topic to discuss. Now, the reason why I say 4 process are looking okay for now would be that the first 2 processes you can see, which is Sec 1 and Sec 2. Sec 1 talks about requirement elicitation. So what kind of requirement elicitation would you do in terms of cybersecurity? Probably you would have to do some kind of analysis, the cybersecurity analysis. So you
Mhm.
would do cybersecurity analysis. Probably this would cover both your cybersecurity analysis and maybe a bit about your performing the TARA, deriving the cybersecurity goals, etc. Then you
Mhm.
go to the cybersecurity implementation. So in your implementation, I would probably relate it towards the concept, the cybersecurity concept itself, where you design the whole thing to make sure that your complete system or software, whatever your scope is, you are developing completely secure.
Mhm.
In terms of, Ronak will take the question in a minute. In terms of the complete cybersecurity implementation, when you're talking about the actual coding or the MATLAB-based models or anything, these are some of the standards that you would already follow, which means in your SWE3, the software unit design and unit construction, or maybe in the software unit verification, you have something called a static code analysis, right? In terms of cybersecurity implementation, what kind of extra checks would you do? Maybe you would do Mishra check. Maybe you would do um, cert checks. So these are some of the things which you are already incorporating in your original software lifecycle. So this is where these two processes, in my perspective, at this stage, would probably suffice. The same way it goes for risk treatment verification and the risk treatment validation. It's more of verification and validation activities. So if you have defined your requirements, what kind of testing you would do? Those testing if would already cover in terms of SW4, 5. So let's say there are some requirements coming from Sec1. So you would eventually integrate that with SWE1 and SWE2, right? If you're not doing over engineering and creating multiple documents. So then as part of your traceability for every requirement, you would definitely have to have some kind of test case, which is already covered in your SWE4 and 5. Now, in terms of verification and validation, extra tests that you would have to do, probably some kind of vulnerability analysis you would have to do, then maybe some penetration testing. So these are some of the things, or maybe some kind of fuzzing. These are some of the things that you would do in the verification and probably at the validation level as well. So this is my take on these processes.
Okay, Ronak. Before we go on to the question from Ronak, there is one thing I want to specify between Sec3 and Sec4. Currently, looking at the way it is being described, the particularly Sec4, it only talks about the verification of cybersecurity goals. Yeah. So which means it looks more relevant for an OEM on that sense. So I have not seen or I have not heard maybe some of the tier ones particularly being assessed. So it would be interesting to see or check with one of the assessors to check whether they also include Sec4 whenever they, let's say, assess a tier one, because normally cybersecurity goals are the responsibilities of the OEM. So that is one thing. And Sec3 normally covers all the testing activities, verification activities until the system level. So that's what my insight after going through the standard a bit in detail. Okay, Ronak.
Yeah. My question was about relation from ISO 21434 and ASPICE. So in the 21434, we see like the standard is divided or describing so many activities, and also between different groups like organizational management activities or project dependent activities or maybe the development activities and so on. So is there any mapping between all these activities defined from ISO 21434 to these four processes in ASPICE or not?
Okay. Well, there is some mapping available even in this standard also. If you go through the initial pages, normally you will find some kind of a mapping. But again, at the end of the day, what this processes they cover is they normally cover the process related product risk. So they don't really go too much detail into the technicality, whether the particular cybersecurity mechanism is the right one for this particular product. No, it doesn't normally check that kind of a thing. Rather, it normally talks about the process. So there is some kind of a dependency, but I think that was a good question, Ronak. I think in one of the other slides we had this information.
Yeah, it is actually in terms of if you're tier 1 or tier 2, or even in terms of OEM, it would be really ideal to know the relation between the work products, because normally I've seen in my experience that people end up creating multiple work products because they just say that, okay, this process is SPICE tells that I need to have these many work products. 21434 asks me to create these many work products, but there will be certain relation. You can always merge and mix and match. So in that way, I think this is a very good question.
Exactly. I mean, see, there is one particular section in this particular standard which talks about relation to ISO SAE 21434. Can one of you open the PDF and go to page 6? I think that's a good question from Ronak. Okay, so in the beginning, we were talking about this particular document. I mean, everybody can access this standard, which is called as automotivespice, process reference and assessment model for cybersecurity engineering. So we have a current version. So here, coming back to the question of Ronak, normally there is a section which is called relation to ISO SAE 21434. Yeah, so there we have some information related to how this particular 6 processes, and they are covering what part of the ISO SAE 21434. So this is where, if you see here, there is a project dependent cybersecurity management. You might be aware, if at all you are you have gone through the ISO SAE 21434, there is a project dependent cybersecurity activities or a management part. So there are certain aspects of that standard is being covered by certain generic practices. For example, cybersecurity responsibilities are covered by GP 2.1.5, which normally talks about defined responsibilities and authorities for performing the processes, and so on and so forth. So this is where you can also find the relevant information here. Anyone has any questions?
No, I think, yeah, this is fine.
Okay, now once again coming back to cybersecurity engineering process group, SEC. Can any of you tell me what could be the possible improvements here when you see only 4 processes? Because see, whenever we talk about a V model, there are different abstraction levels, right? However, if you see the cybersecurity engineering process group, it talks about, one process is about the requirement elicitation and one is about the implementation. And then once again, there comes a question whenever somebody wants to, use this in their active, project. When you see an, real project, there are different abstraction levels. You have to derive the requirement in different levels, system, software, hardware, and so on. But that is not well described in the cybersecurity related standard. So what do you guys think could be the challenge when somebody wants to, apply these processes in their, real project or in their ongoing projects?
So if I have to jump in and start, first thing I would like to probably point out, or maybe I would like to see as an improvement, is we are talking about cybersecurity requirement elicitation in SEC1. Now, when we are talking about cybersecurity, it can be at the software level, it can be at the hardware level too. So this is something which is not clearly defined. I would definitely like to see something more with respect to hardware. So let's say I have my cybersecurity mechanisms on my hardware, HSM, some crypto algorithms runs on my different hardware module. What do I do with that? Does the standard already provide me sufficient details, provided the fact that there is no hardware related process already defined in the ASPICE model? So this is something that I would definitely like to see, the relation between SEC1 to SWE, and probably I think in future ASPICE 4.0 hardware related processor also getting added. Maybe something on those lines, or probably bifurcate, because if let's say I have a supplier, separate supplier for hardware, separate supplier for software, how do I define the SEC1 into 2 different groups? So this is something I would.
Yeah, I think that's also my understanding, is because currently it talks about requirement elicitation in general. It doesn't let's say differentiate between deriving at the system level, deriving at the software and the hardware level. Because see, we are normally used to see different chapters in functional safety, There you go to software, then you go to hardware, you start from the system, and before that you start from the concept level. So it is not that well described. So in my opinion, that is also something organization need to take care of when they want to define their processes in compliance to this particular additional processes. Because if they look at Sec 1 and try to write down their organization process, it's not going to be that easy. Rather, they have to elaborate a bit more. They have to tell in the system level, how do we derive the requirements? What is my input? What is my output? In the software level, how do I derive cybersecurity requirements? What is my input? What is my output? So they have to go bit into the abstraction level. So this is currently, I mean, this the challenge is that it is not well described. Is also the same case with ISO SA 21434. If you guys have gone through that, that also doesn't go in detail to system, software, or software hardware, this abstraction level. Rather, it more talks at the element or a component. I cannot recall what was the word which is used. And normally, yeah, somebody who is working on the on it has to apply this element to think, okay, it's a software element, this is the hardware element, and they have to apply it. On the other hand, standards always say we only describe what to do, not how to do. So that is also another thing, so that they don't be too specific. When the standard, then it is not a standard, right? If it becomes too specific, it is not a standard. So they try to keep it generic, and they would let the user decide how to apply. Rather, they only talk about what should be achieved, not the how part. So yeah, that is also one thing.
So if I understand correctly, for example, if we talk about Sec 1, so generally we have different tiers, right? Like system, someone is developing system, someone is developing software, and so on. Someone is developing hardware. That means, I mean, if my complete project is divided into different tiers who are developing these different things, then everyone has to follow Sec 1, or maybe implement Sec 1, assess, and so on. Then everyone has to do that. Is it correct?
Exactly. Which means if at all I have a software supplier, let's imagine I am a system, tier 1, and I will hand over complete software development, which is cybersecurity critical, to one of the supplier. And I would expect that supplier does the assessment on his own and gives me the assessment result. Then normally the expectation is also that supplier shows the compliance to Sec 1. But the thing is, what is in scope for the supplier? Only the software part, not the system or not the hardware if they don't do the hardware. So they have to, define their scope or the boundary in that case. Yeah, so that's, yeah, I mean, I don't know whether to call it as a challenge or that's how it is, the thing with the standards. But looking at how descriptive the functional safety standard is, I'm expecting that even ISO SA 21434 will also be detailed out in the coming years. That's my feeling. Which is also the case with the Sec 3, because see, now risk treatment verification. What is it? What is it covering? Yeah, exactly. So it is actually covering everything, right? It is covering your SW4 to SW6. It is covering
Also
SIS4 and
SIS4
SIS5. And also hardware and mechanical testing also. Okay, I don't know in the mechanical part how much of a cybersecurity comes into play, but in the hardware definitely. But again, when a supplier has to apply this standard, then they also have to think about it, about those parts. So that is something what somebody who is using the standard should also know about. Okay, colleague. So now we talk a bit about MAN 7 as a part of the management process group, which talks about cybersecurity risk management. Okay. Now, what is covered here? What is normally addressed in this case? To give you one high-level answer, this covers more or less the TARA, threat analysis and risk assessment, which is described as a part of ISO SCA 21434. Yeah, which means if you check what are the base practices as a part of this MAN 7 cybersecurity risk management, it is more on determining the cybersecurity risk management scope, which is more about what project, what system, what software, what is in scope. Define cybersecurity risk management. What are your different steps of doing the risk management, whether you do potential risk identification, how do you do risk analysis, how do you do risk evaluation, how do you do risk determination, and so on. Identifying the potential risks, which is also something we do if at all you're familiar with the threat analysis and risk assessment. In the scope of that particular project, product, system, or software, whatever is in scope, we also try to identify potential risk. And we prioritize the potential risk to understand what is high, what is low priority, what is medium. I mean, there could also be different categories as well. Then we analyze that potential risk and evaluate the risk. Then we define the risk treatment. Then we monitor the risk so that we mitigate it. So these are, the base practices. The last one is take corrective actions, which typically reminds me, end-to-end threat analysis and risk assessment process.
So a quick question here. I mean, this seems more like you're doing a technical risk analysis. What is the rationale of putting cybersecurity risk management under management process group?
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. My hypothesis is, as I said earlier, ASPICE is more about identifying the process-related risks in the product, which means even if I say that, okay, this particular cybersecurity risk management is similar to, any of the existing risk, identification methods such as TARA, threat analysis and risk assessment, an organization need to have certain set of processes in order to identify how to go about this particular, risk identification, evaluation, categorization, corrective action choosing, and so on and so forth, and maybe have certain templates, certain tools in place. So this is where, even though the outcome is more of identifying the actual risks in that particular product, which is in scope, this particular process talks more about having a right process in place, including templates or tools, having proper steps in place. So that's my hypothesis. That's why I think it is, included as a part of the management process group.
Interesting.
Okay. Now, on this overview, colleagues, because we already told, because in the next episodes, we will deep dive into each of these processes. We will go through the base practice. We will talk about it. We will also bring in our experience, how to show compliance, how to fulfill these base practices, what is the right approach, what could be the challenges. But for an organization, imagine they already have a ASPICE process landscape in place. Okay. Now they want to integrate or add these additional 6 processes, which means they have a proper working ASPICE process landscape in place at the organization level. Now they want to bring in these new 6 processes. With your experience, what could be the challenges or what they have to keep in mind when they integrate these 6 new processes into their existing organization process landscape?
Yes, challenges would be in existing process landscape. If they want to integrate the cybersecurity process, then I would say a lot of tailoring required for their process landscape. Also, since cybersecurity is continuous process, then they have to also think about how frequently they would update this process tailoring part. So that also be challenging. So yeah, these are the major challenging apart from the work they have to do for cybersecurity.
Maybe what I think is, though these are separate processes, it is not separate from above process for the system or the software one. So it is like some of the activities and so on are uh, overlapping. So it is not like maybe I just develop SEC one separately and do that would work, but maybe I also have to update other affecting process from the old one. Yeah, maybe that could be one.
Okay. Anyone? Falgu?
Yeah, but I would concur with what Ronak mentioned. So it is not completely different. There are so many things that you would have to integrate. However, the challenges would still remain if there are some hardware or mechanical things. How would you want to define? So this is where it is quite um, effort taking experience or effort taking exercise, I would say, to define these requirements, because I'm pretty sure when these cybersecurity engineering process would be integrated with in the process landscape of those companies who are actually looking to execute the cybersecurity relevant projects. So in which case they would already be doing something related to cybersecurity, which means ISO 21434 related work. They would already be doing something. So this is where it would be a key for the quality experts to identify those similarities between 21434 and this process, and also the gaps which you have to introduce newly when it comes to sec 1 2 3 4. So this is where that would be the biggest let's say effort from my perspective, that the quality experts in the organization will have to figure out in order to bridge the gap between the existing security things that they are doing and this ASPICE new set of rules that are coming in process for this ASPICE for cybersecurity.
Okay. Riva?
So they should keep in mind that they need to add or a separate cybersecurity section. They can also do it in their existing templates, which are the software or system requirements or other templates which are already present, or they can also create new documents for this. There are also various different cybersecurity templates which needs to be created when we talk about this new implementation of the cybersecurity engineering process group in the ASPICE.
Okay. So I think that's also a good point, because some of the templates or the work products which are required by these 6 processes, they were not a part of the original ASPICE process landscape. Then they have to be newly created. On the other hand, we also have to be a bit careful so that we don't do an over engineering. For example, if at all the question is in the system level, do I need a separate template for cybersecurity specification at the system level? We don't need normally, right? We can optimize. We already have a system level specification template. Maybe add or modify that to include the cybersecurity related specification. We can also approach the review parts or review protocols in the same way, because we already have a review checklist existing. If at all I already have a process in place, now how do I modify or what do I need to change when it comes to cybersecurity? Maybe add some additional checklist point to check the different aspects related to cybersecurity. So this is where you know it shouldn't be like, okay, I have a new process, now I start doing everything newly, create all the templates newly, and so on and so forth. Rather, it has to be pragmatic, and one should think, how do I harmonize these new processes with my existing process so that it doesn't add up additional burden on the developers or the requirement engineer. Because now if you go back to a requirement engineer and say that now I have two templates, once you have to write system specification, and in another one you have to write system cybersecurity specification, they will go mad. So this is where I think organization also has to think about how to optimize so that everything goes in a flow. And I think which is also the understanding at the end of the day that security is not a different life cycle. Rather, it has to go hand in hand with your normal development process activities. Good, colleagues. Then I think in the next episodes we will talk a bit more on the individual processes.
So thank you for watching this series. I hope this was entertaining. We hope this was entertaining for you and informative for you. Please do visit www.carniq.ai and subscribe to our channel.